I'm a 31-year-old woman, single, and I work full-time as a financial controller for a mid-sized logistics company in the suburbs. 2 months ago, I had laparoscopic surgery to treat an ovarian condition I'd been managing for years. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was painful, and the procedure required time to recover, both physically and mentally. I planned ahead like I do with everything. Froze meals, deep-cleaned my apartment, made lists, even lined up my sick leave to ensure I had 2 full weeks to rest without worrying about work. And Denise offered. My older sister, Denise, is 34. She has 2 young kids, a golden retriever that sheds like crazy, and a husband named Bryce who works long shifts in construction. We've never been especially close. We don't fight, but we don't bond either. Her offer came out of nowhere. She said I should recover at her house, that it'd be more comforting, and I'd have family around to help. I hesitated. She said I was being dramatic. I said okay. The first night at Denise's, I realized how wrong I'd been. The guest room had old wrapping paper shoved under the bed, out-of-season clothes still hanging in the closet, and toys stuffed behind the door. The sheets smelled faintly of dog. I tried to stay grateful. Denise brought me soup from a can and said she was too tired to make anything more. The dog barked half the night. Her kids fought over whose turn it was to use the iPad. I hadn't even unpacked my meds and I already wanted to go home. The second day, the comments started. Must be nice to nap all day while the rest of us work. Look at you, pampered princess. You sure this surgery was even necessary? I ignored them. I focused on resting. But it kept coming. If I asked for a quiet room to lie down, she'd roll her eyes. If I reminded her I wasn't supposed to lift anything heavy, she'd mutter about how she did laundry after giving birth. I even caught her mocking my recovery to Bryce when she thought I couldn't hear her from the hallway. Then came the moment I couldn't shake. I fell asleep on the couch one afternoon, still sore and dizzy from the meds. I woke up to Denise's youngest, a 4-year-old with a toy fire truck, climbing on my stomach. The pressure made me gasp. I tried to sit up but winced and froze. Denise stood in the kitchen sipping from a mug, watching. When I asked her not to let the kids jump on me, she shrugged. Maybe you're not fit to be alone if you can't even handle a toddler climbing on you. Denise had always hinted that I was too independent for my own good, but this was the first time she said it so openly. That sentence burned. She wasn't just talking about recovery. She was talking about me. It's about how I live. About not being a mother. It's about not needing help. About not needing her. She saw me as weak or broken, or just less than her. I packed my things that evening and told her I had a work emergency. She barely looked up from her phone. No hug. No goodbye from the kids. I got into my car, drove home, and cried for the first time in years. Not from pain, but from the sheer humiliation of it. And here's where it gets complicated. Denise doesn't know that for the past year and a half, I've been the one paying the remainder of their mortgage every month. Our grandfather set up a trust fund before he passed, meant to support Denise and her children, with me as the executor. The condition was clear. I could cut off payments if I ever felt the money was being misused or that Denise wasn't acting in good faith. She never asked where the money came from. She assumed it was the trust distributing directly, but it wasn't. It was routed through a holding account I control. She thought it was automatic. It wasn't. I'd always justified the payments because the kids deserved a stable home. But after what happened, I started thinking about the trust's exact wording. Support may be suspended at the executor's discretion if the beneficiary engages in manipulation, deceit, or persistent irresponsibility. I opened a private folder on my laptop. I started documenting everything. The comments, the dismissiveness, the laughter, the way she mocked me, the way she treated my health like a punchline. I reviewed the financials, her unnecessary expenses, late credit payments, frequent fund transfers to a side business she never reported to the trust. This isn't about revenge. This is about boundaries. And this time, I'm going to enforce mine. Because if she wants to treat me like I'm useless, she can learn what life looks like when the person she calls unfit stops footing the bill. Back at my apartment, I didn't talk to anyone about what Denise said, but I couldn't stop going over it in my mind. That word unfit just sat there, stuck in the back of everything. So I opened my laptop and pulled up the trust account. I went through every transfer I'd authorized since taking over as executor. Every monthly top-up was the same, $1,100 straight to the mortgage lender, never to Denise's personal account. I checked the memo lines, the timestamps, the ledger. It was all clean, at least the surface of it. Then I dug deeper. 2 transactions stood out immediately. Both were marked household emergency and reimbursed through the discretionary fund. But when I matched the purchase codes, they didn't line up with anything urgent. One was for a $450 fire pit, and the other was a $300 virtual reality headset, same model Bryce once showed off in a group chat. Neither of those qualified under the trust's emergency clause. Not even close. I scheduled a meeting with a trust attorney the next morning. I wasn't planning to sue anyone. I just needed confirmation. Did I, as executor, have the right to pause the disbursements without violating the terms? He reviewed everything and confirmed I had full discretion, and if I suspected manipulation or misuse, I could halt payments until a proper review was done. So I did it. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn her. I just skipped the next scheduled disbursement. I knew the mortgage company would follow up with her once the payment bounced. 10 days, tops. Denise called on day 9. She didn't sound angry, just confused. Asked if I'd noticed anything weird on the account because the mortgage company reached out. I said I'd check and get back to her. That was it. I wasn't offering answers yet. I wanted to watch how she handled it. The next day, I got a text from her. You don't know what it's like to have real responsibilities. I didn't answer. That line told me everything. She wasn't worried about the kids. She wasn't apologetic. She was trying to shame me again. I let her sit in that silence. A few days later, Bryce called me from his work number. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months. His voice was calm, but I could hear the edge in it, not anger, just pressure. He asked if I had any idea what was going on with the trust. I told him, yes, I did. He said they weren't aware there were conditions tied to the support, that they assumed the trust was automatic. I kept it simple. All I ever asked for was respect. I didn't get that. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, quietly, okay, and hung up. That same week, one of our mutual friends, someone I trust, reached out, said Denise was making comments at a group dinner. She was telling people I was dangling money like I was royalty, that I was using it to control the family, that I'd become a financial bully. It wasn't public, just whispered among people who wouldn't say it to my face, but it made its way back to me anyway. I logged back into the trust software and ran another audit. This time, I found something worse. Denise had submitted a special disbursement request last month, flagged for roof repairs due to storm damage. It had been approved under emergency maintenance, and $3,200 was released to her checking account. But when I checked the charge history on the account that received the money, it didn't go to any contractor. It went to an online travel agency. The same weekend, she took the kids to Disneyland. That was it. I emailed my attorney again and requested the trust be frozen. All future requests would require formal applications with itemized receipts, contractor bids, or medical documentation. Nothing would be automatic anymore. The next morning, I drafted a certified letter, one for Denise, one for Bryce. It outlined the freeze and included a detailed list of every misuse. I sent it with delivery confirmation. I made sure both had to sign to receive it. 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time it was my parents. They asked what was going on between me and Denise. I didn't get into the drama. I just said, I'm protecting the family legacy. That's my job now. My mother sighed and said I should have given her a heads up. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. Denise hasn't said anything directly since. No calls. No texts. But I did get a short message from Bryce sent late at night. Thanks for being honest. I didn't know. I believe him. He might have benefited, but I don't think he knew the truth. Not all of it. And now he does. A few days after the certified letters were delivered, Bryce sent another message. This one didn't have any passive aggression or guilt trips. It was just a simple question. Why didn't anyone tell me you helped with the down payment? I hadn't expected that. I replied with one sentence. Because Denise told you it was a gift from the family. The truth was, $30,000 of the original down payment on their house didn't come from the trust. It came straight from my personal savings. Denise had asked for help years ago, before they bought the place. She said it was temporary, that she'd pay me back once Bryce's business picked up, but she never brought it up again. And when I asked casually about repayment once, she brushed it off like I was joking. I let it go. It wasn't worth a fight, but now Bryce knew. We met the next day during my lunch break at a cafe near my office. I told him I didn't want anything confrontational and would only meet in public. He agreed. When he walked in, he looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. He ordered a black coffee, sat down, and didn't say much. Just waited. I brought printed copies, wire receipts from my personal account to their closing agent, an old email where Denise thanked me for saving them from losing the house before they even got it, and a basic agreement she'd typed up. Nothing fancy, just something we both signed, saying I'd be listed as a partial equity holder. No one but her and I knew that existed. Bryce stared at the papers for a long time. He finally said, I thought the house was fully ours. I didn't know you were tied to any of this. I explained I'd never enforced the agreement. I'd never asked for interest or repayment. But legally, my name gave me the right to file a lien if I ever wanted to, and if things kept going the way they were, I might consider it. Bryce didn't argue. He looked like someone who'd just been hit with a wave of missing puzzle pieces. He admitted he'd always assumed Denise handled things honestly, that she said the money was an inheritance from our grandfather, and that it had nothing to do with me. She'd made it sound like the trust just handed out money like a scholarship fund. I told him she didn't lie completely, it was from the family. Just not the way he thought. And not all of it came from the trust. That $30,000 came from me, someone she now calls unfit to live alone. He stayed quiet. Then he apologized. Said he was sorry for not stepping in when Denise made the comments during my recovery. Said he didn't know. Said if he had, he would have handled it differently. I told him I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't interested in court battles or forcing repayment, but I wasn't going to keep pretending like none of it mattered. Her respect wasn't optional anymore. And I was done being polite at my own expense. Later that night, Denise sent a message. No greeting. Just, I cannot believe you went behind my back to talk to my husband. I replied, he deserves to know who's holding the foundation of his home together. She didn't reply. The next day, my parents called. Again, my mother asked if this was really necessary, if I was going to tear the family apart over a few misunderstandings. My father suggested I give it some time, that things always settle. I told them both to stop calling. I said this wasn't about childhood drama or favoritism or anything from the past. This was about now, about accountability, about what happens when someone uses your help like a ladder, then kicks you once they reach the roof. I ended the call and emailed my lawyer. I asked him to begin restructuring the trust. Discretionary access was being revoked. From now on, no emergency disbursements would be allowed without full documentation and a 2-week review process. All expenses would be audited quarterly. Any misuse would result in a permanent freeze and legal review. Bryce hasn't said much since our meeting, but I know he's thinking about it. He's seen the paperwork. He knows the truth now. And for the first time, the way he looks at Denise has shifted. I'm not trying to come between them, but I've pulled back the curtain. Whatever they do next is up to them. I didn't plan this fallout. But I'm not going to stop it either. A few days after our cafe meeting, Bryce sent a short message asking if I had a copy of the property deed. I did. I had saved every document from the closing process, including the final notarized deed that clearly listed me as a 30% co-owner of the house. I scanned and emailed him the file within the hour. He didn't reply that day, but I knew exactly what he'd be doing with it. The next day, Bryce called their mortgage company to confirm the ownership structure. Then he confronted Denise after a few days of hesitation, clearly trying to piece things together as the truth slowly caught up to him. I wasn't there, but I found out what happened after he messaged me again. Denise denied it completely. She told him I had only loaned the money and never intended to be added to the title. She claimed the co-ownership was just for paperwork to help with approval. She acted like it wasn't legally binding. I didn't argue with her directly. I just forwarded Bryce and the mortgage company the full file, the deed, the closing statements, and the agreement Denise and I signed when the funds were wired. The agreement was simple but clear. I contributed funds in exchange for partial equity, and no part of that contribution was ever defined as a gift. Everything was dated and notarized. Bryce texted later that night. He didn't ask any more questions. He said he felt like a guest in his own life, that he had no idea how much was hidden from him. He thanked me for being transparent and said he was still processing everything. 2 days later, Denise sent me an email. No greeting, no explanation, just a demand. She wanted me to sign a release of interest form she had attached to the message. The form looked like something downloaded from the internet. No lawyer's name, no letter's name, no letterhead, just blanks filled in with shaky language, asking me to forfeit all claims to the property. I didn't respond immediately. I read the file twice. Then I replied with a short note. I would be happy to discuss any formal buyout offer once the home was professionally appraised and attorneys were involved. Until then, I wouldn't be signing anything. Within an hour, she replied. She called me bitter, controlling, and accused me of using the house to play power games. I didn't reply to that one. Nothing in it required a response. I scheduled a licensed appraiser the following week and notified both my attorney and Bryce. The appraiser was professional, prompt, and discreet, but the tension inside the house was thick. Denise followed us from room to room, pointing out every flaw in the walls and carpet. As he measured the living room, she made a loud comment, "Don't forget to measure all the drama in here too." The appraiser didn't react, but later, after he'd left, he called me from his car. He said he'd never been treated so rudely during a walkthrough, and that it was obvious there were non-financial emotions involved in the home. Meanwhile, Denise had started sharing her version of events with people we both knew. She told one mutual acquaintance that I was trying to steal the house from under her. Another person reached out to me, saying Denise was telling people I tricked her into giving up rights and had been plotting this revenge for years. I didn't engage publicly. I stayed quiet. But one old friend who knew us both well reached out privately. She told me she didn't believe Denise's version and wanted me to know that people were starting to realize something was off. Even our cousin, someone who usually stays out of drama, brought it up when we caught up over coffee. She mentioned Denise had gone quiet in the group chats and hadn't shown up to the last 2 family dinners. She didn't ask for details, just said, "I can tell something's going on." A week later, the appraisal came in. The house had gone up in value by over $80,000 since the purchase. My 30% share was now worth over $90,000. I forwarded the report to my attorney and asked him to send a formal notice to Denise, informing her that I would be enforcing my rights as a co-owner. I asked for a legal meeting to discuss options, a buyout, a refinance, or a full sale. Bryce messaged me again after the letter was delivered. He said he didn't want to lose the house. But he also said, I don't think she should get to rewrite history either. He didn't take sides. He didn't accuse her, but he didn't cover for her either. I haven't heard from Denise since the letter went out. No email, no texts. But the silence says plenty. A week after the appraisal report was delivered, I heard from Bryce again. He mentioned in passing that a few of their neighbors had asked if I was trying to break up their family. Apparently, Denise had started telling people I was interfering with their finances and putting their home at risk. I didn't respond to the gossip. There was no point. I had bigger things to focus on. Our lawyers had scheduled a formal meeting at a neutral office downtown. It was the first time all 4 of us would be in the same room. I arrived 10 minutes early, as did my lawyer. Bryce showed up on time, quiet and polite. Denise walked in 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors and acting like the room wasn't full of tension. Her lawyer looked like he'd aged a year before she even sat down. Once everyone settled, I laid out the 2 options on the table. Either they refinance the mortgage and buy me out at fair market value, or we agree to sell the house and split the proceeds based on ownership percentage. My lawyer slid over the documents and figures based on the appraisal. Everything was clean, legal, and reasonable. Denise didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she said I should consider donating my share since I wasn't raising children and didn't need the space. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably but didn't interrupt. She claimed that family support should mean sacrifice, especially from someone without kids. The room went quiet. Then Bryce spoke. He said clearly and without hesitation, we wouldn't even have this house if it weren't for her. His voice didn't shake. He didn't look at Denise when he said it. He just looked straight at the table. Denise stood up so suddenly her chair scraped against the floor. She said she was done being ambushed, grabbed her purse, and stormed out without waiting for her lawyer. Bryce didn't move. He stayed, reviewed the documents with us, and asked a few direct questions. He asked about timelines, appraisals, and how a refinance would work. He took notes. After Denise left, Bryce and I spoke privately in the hallway. He admitted he had no idea how many financial shortcuts Denise had taken before they were even married. He said he was starting to wonder what else she had kept from him. I didn't dig. I just told him I wanted this handled cleanly. Our lawyers explained the next steps. As co-owners, we each had legal rights, and if no agreement was reached, I could petition the court to force a sale. Denise's refusal to compromise only weakened her position. Bryce nodded, didn't say much more, and promised to follow up. The next day, my lawyer sent a formal letter, a notice of intent to resolve or proceed with a court-supervised sale. It gave Denise 30 days to come to an agreement or face legal action. The letter was delivered and signed for the following morning. 3 days later, Denise showed up outside my workplace. She was parked across the lot, waiting. When I walked to my car, she got out and tried to corner me by the driver's side. She raised her voice, demanding to talk. She said I was ruining her life, that I was tearing apart her home, and that I did this all over one stupid comment. I didn't respond. I walked past her, unlocked my car, and drove off. That same afternoon, I filed a report with building security and notified our HR department. They reviewed the parking lot footage, documented the incident, and added a flag to her name in case she showed up again. HR was professional and supportive. They confirmed I'd taken the right steps. After a few vague calls earlier in the week expressing concern, my parents showed up at my apartment without calling first. They knocked holding grocery bags and wearing worried expressions. My mother asked if we could just talk. My father said things were going too far. I let them in, but kept it brief. I reminded them I wasn't the one who broke the peace. I wasn't the one lying or spending trust funds on vacations and surgery. I was the one holding receipts. Meanwhile, the quarterly audit I'd triggered on the trust fund came back with more findings. 2 flagged entries stood out. One was labeled health emergency, reimbursed for $1,750. The receipt was for a cosmetic clinic, a rhinoplasty consultation invoice under Denise's name. Another entry was for a car repair that turned out to be a set of designer rims for Bryce's truck. I emailed the audit summary to the Trust's advisory board, attached full documentation, and submitted a formal recommendation to permanently disqualify Denise from future disbursements. I had enough evidence, and the fund's terms were clear. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to protect the legacy our grandfather tried to leave behind. Denise had treated it like her personal bank account. She'd made her choices. Now I was making mine. 3 weeks after I submitted the final audit report to the Trust's advisory board, I received a legal notice at my apartment. Denise had filed for a temporary restraining order against me. According to the court documents, she claimed I was harassing her, intimidating her family, and threatening her children's housing security. She even accused me of manipulating Bryce for personal gain. There were no attachments, no police reports, no incident numbers. Just a formal court date was scheduled 5 days later, expedited due to her claim involving housing security for children, which qualified for temporary review. I immediately retained an attorney who specializes in malicious restraining order cases. We gathered everything: emails, legal correspondence, property documents, the signed agreement from the home purchase, and the full trust audit. I organized each section by date and labeled everything clearly. Nothing could be questioned without backup. On the morning of the hearing, Denise showed up dressed like she was attending a press conference. Her lawyer carried a folder full of printed screenshots. I recognized some of them, emails between us, but they had clearly been cropped. Context was missing. Entire responses were omitted. It looked like I'd been firing off threats, when in reality I'd been replying to her lawyer and staying entirely civil. When it was my turn, I handed the judge a binder. Inside were the unedited email chains, complete with headers, timestamps, and my lawyer CC'd on almost every message. I included the trust's terms, the co-ownership deed, the certified appraisal, and the timeline of events from the mortgage documents. The judge read through each section carefully. After 20 minutes, he looked at Denise and asked her if she was aware that I was listed as a legal co-owner of the home. She said yes. He asked her if I had ever entered the property without permission or made any threats. She said no. Then he asked why she believed filing for a restraining order was the appropriate solution instead of following standard co-owner negotiation procedures. She didn't answer. The judge dismissed the request on the spot and issued a warning. If she attempted to file another false claim without new evidence, she could face sanctions. Her lawyer didn't object. He just packed up their papers and walked her out. After the courtroom cleared, Bryce stayed behind. He stood by the benches, staring at the door. Then he turned to me and said, "I should have stopped this before it got this far." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just looked exhausted. I thanked him for staying neutral during the hearing. That afternoon, a former classmate who now works part-time in the county clerk's office texted me. She mentioned she'd overheard Denise in the hallway after the hearing, talking to someone about how the judge didn't take the bait and how people were going to know what side of the family I was really on. That's how I learned Denise was already trying to reframe the outcome. Again. 2 days later, Bryce reached out privately. He asked if I'd consider selling my 30% share directly to him. He said he was looking at his options seriously and didn't want to lose the home just because things had fallen apart. He hinted that he was considering a divorce, though he didn't go into detail. I told him I'd support a clean transfer if he proceeded, and that I'd loop in a real estate lawyer for accuracy. While my attorney coordinated with his, Denise made another appearance, this time at my apartment building. She waited in the guest parking area and approached the lobby when a delivery driver opened the front door. This time, security documented the incident and passed the footage to the local police, who filed a formal warning in case of repeat trespass. She buzzed up and yelled my name through the intercom. When I didn't respond, she came around to the back exit near the garage and started raising her voice, trying to get me to come outside. I stayed in my apartment and called building security. They reviewed the camera footage and confirmed she had trespassed. They called the police. When the officers arrived, she was given a formal verbal warning and added to the building's no trespass list. If she showed up again, it would be considered criminal trespass. She left before things escalated further. That same evening, the advisory board of the trust held its quarterly meeting. I had submitted a full report the week before. After reviewing the misused disbursements, the falsified descriptions, and the attempted retaliation through legal channels, the board voted unanimously to revoke Denise's access to the trust permanently. She could no longer submit requests, apply for reimbursements, or benefit from any remaining assets under its control. As for Bryce, things are shifting rapidly. He's still living in the house but has started asking questions about their finances, the early years of the trust, even old receipts. I don't know what decision he'll make, but I can see the change. He's watching everything differently now. Meanwhile, I'm preparing for the next phase, a full legal partition of the property if no buyout offer is finalized within the deadline. I'm not pushing. I'm just moving forward, one documented step at a time. My lawyer finalized the equity sale agreement and sent it to Bryce with a 45-day deadline. It laid out clear terms. He could purchase my 30% ownership of the house at current market value. The transaction would only go through if he refinanced the mortgage in his name alone, with Denise's name fully removed from the loan. The language was tight, legally sound, and written with enough protection that once I was out, I'd be out for good. Bryce replied 2 days later. He had already met with a mortgage broker. According to the broker's projections, Bryce just barely qualified to refinance if he filed as the sole borrower. No cosigner, no Denise. He didn't sound confident, but he didn't back away either. A week after that, Bryce messaged to say he was speaking with a separate attorney. He didn't explain why, and he didn't say the word divorce, but the implication was obvious. He asked for some flexibility in scheduling the closing because of other legal priorities he was managing on the side. I told my lawyer to work with whatever timeline kept it clean and enforceable. Right around that time, my parents reached out again. They wanted me to pause everything, just long enough for things to calm down. I reminded them that I didn't declare war. Denise did, when she used family money as her private fund, when she rewrote history, when she filed false legal claims. I wasn't dragging anything out. I was cleaning it up. 3 nights later, Denise sent me one last email. It was long. 5 paragraphs. A mix of half-hearted apologies, justifications, and bitterness. She said I blew everything out of proportion. She said I had always used money as a weapon, and claimed I was just jealous of her family life. She ended it by accusing me of using the trust to take back control. I replied once, I never owed you silence, and you never expected me to remember that I was owed dignity. There was no reply after that. Bryce signed the formal equity buyout agreement the next day. My lawyer reviewed the mortgage terms and confirmed the new loan was approved. The paperwork included a clause that permanently severed Denise from any claim to the 30% share I once owned, even if they stayed married, even if the house was sold, even if she tried to dispute it in the future. 3 weeks later, the money landed in my account. There were no court hearings, no last-minute objections, no drama, just wire confirmations, signatures, and one final visit. Bryce escorted me to the house so I could sign a closing document in front of the notary who came to witness. Denise wasn't home. I walked through the entryway, into the kitchen where we'd once all had coffee years ago. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It was quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced there before. We signed the final page. The notary packed up. I nodded to Bryce, and he opened the door for me. Nothing else needed to be said. 2 days later, Bryce sent a short text. Thank you for not walking away from this, even when it got ugly. I see everything clearly now. I didn't reply. He didn't need me to. At the next family gathering, a cousin's engagement dinner, Denise didn't show up. Our parents were there, but they didn't ask about her, didn't mention her, didn't try to explain anything. They just let it hang, like the topic was too heavy to touch and too familiar to argue about anymore. A week after that, I ran into someone at the grocery store, a mutual acquaintance from years back. She asked how I was doing. Nothing more. She didn't mention Denise, but she paused before saying goodbye like there was more she wanted to say but didn't. I didn't push. Meanwhile, I completed the trust restructuring. A licensed professional was appointed as the new executor. All discretionary payouts were locked behind strict auditing. Denise was permanently removed as a beneficiary. Bryce's children would still have access, but through a guardian-managed account he'd oversee with quarterly checks. The illusion was finally dismantled. I didn't feel like I'd won something. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. Denise had built her stability on a lie and expected me to keep funding it quietly. When I stopped, the cracks showed. I didn't tear her life apart. I just stopped paying for the illusion she worked so hard to protect. Now, I've started looking for my own place. A small property. Something quiet. No shared deeds. No trust oversight. No emotional debt tangled in legal documents. Just my name, my rules, and a front door I don't have to knock on first. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally standing on ground that's solid, and mine alone.